Welcome to Legendary IT YouTube. So today we are going to talk about input function in Python. Welcome. So to start with, I have two files in this folder called input function. The first one has the necessary nodes where we can go through, and also I have a test file where we will be writing programs on. So let's begin. In Python, input function is used to take values from the user and store in a variable while the program is running. Now, before we actually go deeper into input function, we will start with several ways of storing values to a variable, or in other words, initializing a variable, or also assigning value to a variable. So we can term that using different wordings. So initialization, assignment, and storing are just the same thing. They all refer to ways of getting the value to an address in a memory location called the variable. Now, the first method we have is called static initialization. So for static initialization, it usually happens where when the program is not running, first of all, and when we say static initialization, this is an act of storing a value to a variable. So this happens before saving the file, and when you save and run the file, that's when the value is stored. But the act of taking the value, writing total equals to 100 statically before running the file, that's why I term this as static initialization. So to test this, I'll come to my test.py Python file. Every Python file must have an extension of .py. So I'll come here. I want to talk about static initialization. Here we said we use assignment operator for this, and it usually happens when the program is not running. So before we continue, I can hide this part because I don't want it to, I can always show it or hide it. So I'll come here and type total equals to 100. Then I have to save the file. So to save, press Ctrl S. So I've supplied 100 before actually running the program. So this is why I'm saying this is static initialization. Then come to your terminal using the command prompt. Make sure you navigate to the folder where your file is, and that is the path to my file. Now I'll come and type Python and then total test.py. Before that, I even run the program. I have to also include how to see the results. Total is, and I say total. So I'm using f-string substitution to display the results or the total in this case. So I'll come here and type Python test.py, press enter. The total is 100. So that is static initialization, supplying the value manually before running the program. Come to our material again. Second method we have is called dynamic initialization. This usually happens when the program is running. So here we use input function and assignment operator. But in the first one, we only used assignment operator. So on the second one, we'll use input and assignment operator to do this. So let's begin with the input function. So what is input function? We find that it's used to extract value from the keyboard and then pass the value to assignment operator while the program is running, and eventually to a variable. So the syntax we have is the variable, then the assignment operator, then input function, then prompt statement inside the speech marks. So what's a variable? A variable, this is a valid identifier. Basically, it follows the rules for naming an identifier. Second, we have the prompt statement. So the prompt statement is what is displayed on the screen, indicating to the user a value needs to be entered through the keyboard. So user is usually signaled that a value needs to be entered by a blinking pipe command. Pipe command is this. So whenever you see this at the terminal or the command prompt while you are running a program with input function, that's an indication that user input is required. So after the user enter a value and press enter key on the keyboard, the value is extracted by input from the keyboard and stored in the variable. So the value extracted is treated as a string automatically by default. So let's look at that, what that actually means. Let's break it down. So we're talking about dynamic input. We say dynamic input, we use input function and assignment operator. So for example, I can say result equals to, and then when you look at the syntax, we have the variable name, input, and then the prompt statement. So here I'll come and say the syntax we have is a variable, input, and then you have a prompt statement. So variable, so the variable in this case is results, and then I put the input function, then I supply the brackets. Inside the bracket, I put prompt statement. So prompt statement. So the prompt statement is what indicates to the user what needs to be entered, just where the pipe command will be. So put speech marks and then say enter science result, for example. Then I have to save the file, Control S to save the file. Come at the end, press enter, print then put f-string substitution and say the science result is this. So as you can see this program, there is nowhere I have entered the value or I have written the results, the value for results. So unlike the first option where I had written 100. So here the value will be entered dynamically the moment I run this program. So that is the main difference between static and dynamic initialization. For static, you have to write the value before running the program. But for dynamic, the value will be supplied when the program is running. So let's come to the command prompt and type python test.py. Press enter. You can see the pipe command is appearing there, indicating or signaling that a value needs to be entered. So when you look at this, you can see that the prompt statement is what is displayed on the screen, indicating to the user a value needs to be entered through the keyboard. When you look at this, you'll see this prompt statement is indicating that a value needs to be entered. And at the end, you can see I have this pipe command. That's where now we see that. So I use a signal that a value needs to be entered by blinking pipe command. When you come to this, you'll see there is this blinking pipe command signaling a value needs to be entered. Next, after a user enters a value and press enter, the value is extracted by input function from the keyboard and then stored in the variable. So I'll come to this and type 300 for example, then I press enter. The value is extracted by input from the keyboard and stored in the variable. So you can see the value has been extracted and the output is 300. So that's where I displayed back to see what is inside the result function. So input extracted the value stored in the result variable, and then I'll use the print function to display what is stored in the input function. Now, the value extracted is treated as a string automatically by default. So how does this actually happen, or how do you get to see whether a value is a string or not a string, or how do we test this? So to test this, we'll come to a file. So for this, we will use, so we have a special function called type function, which is used to check data type of values. So for example, let me just comment, or I can just check the data type of the value stored in the result, because you said that input function automatically treats user inputs as string. We'll come here and say, can you show me the data type of the value stored inside the result variable? Press Ctrl S to save. Come back to your command prompt, type the command python test.py. You'll see a pop-up. Let's say 780, any value. So the science result is 80. You can attest the value was extracted and stored in the variable results. But now this variable belongs to a class string denoted by str. That tells us that automatically, that proves the point that values are treated automatically. Also, integer values or values used in calculation are treated as a string automatically. And what is a string? Just a sequence of letters forming a word or a sentence. Now, to prevent a value from being treated as a string type by default, we use a technique called typecasting. Now, what is typecasting? This is an act where the programmer applies certain data type functions to make values be converted to different data type. So we have two major categories of typecasting. So for this, I'll create separate files. So I'll come here and create a new file called typecasting.py. Press enter. Now, we have two major categories. We have implicit typecasting and we have explicit typecasting. So implicit typecasting happens automatically where the compiler or interpreter. So in this case, we're using Python interpreter. So it happens automatically without programmer intervention when converting a variable from one data type to another. For example, from integer value to a float value. So I'll come here and test this implicit typecasting. I'll hide this part. So I want to look at implicit typecasting. So to do this, I'll say t equals to, I just use the same example as here. We have a is 5, b is 2.5. So I'll come c 6, d or k is 7.5. So this first value, this is an integer value, and this second value, this is a float value. The reason I'm saying it's an integer value because it is a whole number, but this one is a decimal. Then I'll come and say print. This pop-up f t plus k. Save the file, Control S, come back to your command prompt. This time I'll type a new file which is called typecasting.py. Press enter. I'm getting 13.5. So you can see that the integer value was converted to a float and then used in the calculation, that is addition, and the result is 13.5. So this happened internally without our intervention. That is what we call implicit typecasting. It happens internally without the programmer intervention. Now, the second one is explicit typecasting. So here is when the programmer manually converts one data type into another using casting functions or constructors. Let's test this, and for this example, I will comment. Let me just comment all these parts. I don't want to use them. So I'll write a program to calculate the total between two subjects, geography and mathematics. So I'll say maths, or I'll say mangoes equals to. So so for this, say mangoes, I can even use normal variables. T equals to 7.8. I come and say, so here we use some special functions for that. We call typecasting functions. Example, we have int, float, string, character, odd, octal, and hex. These are some of the functions that are used with typecasting, explicit typecasting. So I'll come here and say t equals to 7.8. Then I can say print bracket I can come here, say t becomes let me see if I can just do. So I want to convert this to an integer. So I'll subject it into int function or int typecasting function. What it does, it converts a number or a string to integer. So I'll come here, say ft int t. So you say t will be converted to integer. So I've supplied int function. So when I run this program, 7.8 is the decimal part is truncated or removed by default. Another example, I can say f equals to 5. And I can say print bracket f, and I say f will be converted to a float point value. When I run the file, I can be able to see the decimal part is added to it. I can even convert a string. But before I do that, you find that input function treats values automatically as a string, and we saw that. So we want to see the effect of using input function with the values that are supposed to be used in doing calculations. So for example, I can come here and say, I want to use the input function, come and say, length and maths equals to input, enter, max for mathematics. Second, science, enter max for science. Then come and say, the total marks equals to maths plus science, or science, because that is the variable name I used. And then I'll come and say print bracket. You can use f-string substitution. The total marks is bracket, and then I say total. Save. Now, let me run this file and see what is the output. So I come to my command prompt, clear the screen, and then I write the command to run the Python file, press enter. So first part will be executed. So of importance is this part where we have enter max for mathematics. I'll come and say 80, press enter, enter max for science, say 75, press enter. Now, of our interest is the output. So the output is 80, 70. So, but that is not the actual output we expected, because we expected the values to be added together. But the opposite is happening. The values are concatenated together. So I will use the same examples, but this time I want to show you why this is happening. So for example, I can say M. This is what is happening. The values are treated as a string automatically. Total equals to M plus S. And I can just display the total M plus S. So when I run this program this time, I will supply the same value. And we see, so this is 80, this is 75, press enter. You can see the outputs of input function are the same, is the same output in the second phase of this program here. So this part is the same as this part. So we want normal addition. So for this situation, I'll come and wrap this under input function. And I'll wrap this under int function to make them integers and not strings. When I run, I'll say 80, 75. You can see mine is giving me the results, which is 155, the second part of the program. But the first one still has the same values. So how do we fix this problem? This is what we call the logical error. The program is running, but the output is not what we expect. So for this, I'll come to input, wrap this under int function, come in front here, wrap this under int function, and then save the file, come back to your command prompt, clear screen, run the file, enter max for max, let's say 80, 75, press enter. The total marks is 155, 155. So everything is running according to the way we expect the output should be. Yeah, so that is input function. So input function, when you're dealing with the values that are used for calculation, it's advisable that you use typecasting function. You wrap the input function inside typecasting function so that the values cannot be treated as a string automatically, more so those used in doing calculations. The type function we also saw that is used to determine and return the data type of a value or a variable used for debugging, learning, or validating data types in Python. So we've seen we have here input. We've seen input and we've seen implicit and explicit typecasting. Explicit typecasting is where we supply typecasting function. So this is explicit typecasting. So we have the implicit and we have the explicit typecasting. So thank you once again. See you next time.